Hey, welcome to the next in my tutorial series about writing a history paper. In the last video, we talked about writing the body paragraphs, where your argument goes, how you use evidence, and making sure everything stays analytical and cohesive. In this video, we're going to talk about writing a conclusion. So when you get to the point where your entire paper is done, what does that look like for you? I'm going to come over here and share the screen. And we're good to go. So, outline of our video. We're going to first talk about why we bother with conclusions, besides the fact that your prompt just tells you you should. We're also going to talk about what a good conclusion structure looks like. Just like we did with the paragraph structure, we're going to go sentence by sentence and talk about what you should include and work through it step by step with a couple of examples. A conclusion is intended to summarize your entire argument as concisely as possible. You need to remind your audience of what they've read, but you also need to make sure that they took away what you want them to take away. One of the funny things about writing, especially if you write things that are more published, is that people don't always get what you want them to get out of it. Having a concise, clear, well-structured conclusion allows you to hammer home your point, not just what they might have taken out of the text. So what should a conclusion look like? It should only be 5 to 7 sentences. There is no reason for it to be any longer, and if it's any shorter, you will be missing things. First and foremost, you need to reframe your thesis statement. Now, notice I said reframe and not restate. Do not copy and paste your thesis statement from your introduction into your conclusion. That is a little bit mechanical, and it doesn't allow you a little bit more freedom of expression. This should be 1 to 2 sentences. Then you need to summarize your argument step by step, right? Hit your main points. If you have an outline, which you will if you were working through it the same way that I was working through it with you, then that's easy. Look at the kind of your topic sentences. This should be 2 to 3 sentences. There's no need for it to be 4 or 5, because then you've kind of probably gotten a little bit repetitive. But you shouldn't have only 1 sentence, because then you're not actually going into detail. Finally is what I call the mic drop. This is your really punchy, leaving them with your last minute sort of boom. The idea, I call it a mic drop because you should be able to kind of drop the mic and step back from it. Like, you want to be really strong and forceful with this. Again, 1 to 2 sentences. I tend to make mine 1 sentence, but sometimes you need the extra sentence just to transition in there. You want to think of this like that old concept of an elevator speech. I don't know how many of you have been taught to think about, right, short pitches of ideas as elevator speeches. But the idea is that if someone asked you what your paper said as you got into the elevator with them, how would you present your paper so that you got the highlights before everyone got to the floor? So you've kind of think about, you've got like 3 minutes tops in a box with someone. What do you want to tell them? This leads into the next point, which is you don't want to have any new information. If it's important enough for you to say it in your conclusion, that means that you should have already said it in the body of your paper. There's no time to give people new concepts. There's only time to tell them what you've already told them, just in a little bit more concise bits. And then, of course, because quotes are evidence, you don't want to quote anything in your conclusion, because you're not making an argument. There is no room for evidence in what you're doing. So then step 1 will be reframing your thesis. We're going to go through this a bit at a time. Say the same thing as your thesis, just in a different way. It's okay if it doesn't say exactly the right thing. So we're going to look at my sample thesis. The original, the internment of Japanese Americans was an inhumane measure based on racist war hysteria rather than on military necessity. We've been working with us through this whole series. This should be hopefully familiar to you by now. I would reframe it in this way. Although the government forced Japanese Americans into concentration camps with claims of military necessity, this measure was wholly the result of racism and panic after Pearl Harbor. So it's a little bit more wordy than the original, but it kind of has a little bit of a narrative flow, and it is still only 1 sentence. Moving on, we need to summarize our main points. As I said, elevator speech, put this into a few sentences that really encapsulate what you want someone to take out of this. Your audience should be able to understand your paper just by reading the conclusion. So if this means that it's easier to, if you're reading a paper and it's well structured, you can go to the conclusion. Between the intro and the conclusion, you'll have everything you need to know to understand their paper. Yours should be the same way. If someone picked up your 3 to 5 page paper that you're writing for your classes and only had time to spend like 10 minutes on your paper, intro and conclusion. You want your conclusion to be so good that hypothetically your professor could evaluate your thoughts based on that conclusion. As I said earlier, having an outline will help if you forget what your main points are. Sometimes you've been so into the weeds in your paper, you actually don't remember what you wanted to say. Your outline will remind you of those main points. Your topic sentence is a good place to look. My example, President Roosevelt's executive order gave exclusionary powers to the military, which created the illusion that sending Japanese Americans to concentration camps was a wartime necessity. However, Japanese Americans were the only ethnic group targeted in this way. German and Italian Americans were largely left alone, despite the fact that the United States was also at war with Germany and Italy. Thus, their ancestry, rather than military necessity, was the deciding factor in this extreme measure. Now, you'll notice I'm a little bit repetitive right now. Part of that is because I'm coming up with this stuff fairly quickly for you all, but it gives you an idea of what we're working on. Then finally, our mic drop moment. You have one sentence, 2 maximum to hammer your point home. The elevator doors are opening and the person trapped in this elevator with you is about to get off at the next floor. What are you going to say to them before they step out of the elevator? Again, the idea is to be so strong and authoritative you could drop the mic and walk off the stage to resounding applause. The idea is to be so forceful that there's nothing left to say. My example, while the United States prefers to think of itself as the hero of World War II, the inhumane treatment of Japanese Americans proves that the American government was anything but heroic. When pushed, they became just as arbitrary at home as the dictatorships they fought against abroad. Boom, stepping back. So altogether now, you all can read this at your leisure. I'm not going to insult your intelligence by putting it, kind of reading it aloud. I know that I've done that in past videos, but just notice, right, how all of this, I didn't count the words for you, but all of this is about the same length, maybe a little bit shorter than your body paragraph. So it should be fairly comparable in length there. So a couple of takeaways in case to add a conclusion to my conclusion. Conclusions will help you summarize information for your audience. They only need to be 5 to 7 sentences, and they will allow you to put everything together so that your audience knows exactly what you want them to know. And again, a reminder, do not quote or cite. Save that for the body of your paper. Let's see here, stop the share. Thank you all so much for watching. I know this is a very quick video compared to some of my other ones, but conclusions really are fairly straightforward. Once you get to that point in the paper, you should have all of your ideas and all of the components. You're just re-summarizing. I actually find conclusions are the easiest part of the paper. Hopefully you will too. Thanks for watching, and hopefully this was helpful.